Today, we're going to talk about a DPS duo that has been underrated throughout the entirety of Overwatch Champion Series, and going into it, people should have been paying a lot more attention to these two. As it goes with most players, we need to talk about the Overwatch League first, leading up to Champion Series. Most want to forget the Shanghai Dragons of 2023, their worst season since 2018. Similar to Shock, both teams just weren't good in Overwatch League's final year. 2023 was the year of disappointment when it comes to overhyped players and rosters. We also had a lot of budget cuts, especially with Shanghai Dragons, owned by NetEase, being the company who refused the relicensing of Blizzard games in China. So obviously these people aren't going to want to put more money into Overwatch. They signed a more than questionable roster, Fleta on tank, DM, Bebe, and Gangnam Jin as supports. Obviously, going into this season, Iris replaced DM on support. I just thought I would mention him. In DPS of Hisu and Viper, the man of the hour. No one knew who this guy was, like seriously, being on O2 Blast with like 30,000 other DPS players, barely ever getting playtime. A simple Genji one-trick, that's the only name he had. Judging by the rest of this roster, not a soul was expecting anything worth a damn from Viper. Gangnam Jin was obviously going to be playing main support, even though his previous season on NYXL was god-awful. Getting the main support player from the 19th seed of 2022 was a fantastic idea if you ask me, especially when it was the worst performing player too. Very smart. Fleta was going to be playing a lot of Winston. It's just Shanghai had a lot of disaster written all over it, and as expected, the team rolled out, only getting 5 wins throughout the entire year. I guess it's better than Vegas Eternal or Valiant, but what does that prove? Shanghai had a better season than 2 of the worst teams in the league? How inspiring. The anticipated happened. Gangnam Jin main support was not the move. Fleta was horrendous on Winston, but Viper was an absolute animal. As a person who was interested in the automobile wreck known as 2023 Shanghai Dragons, I actually watched all their matches throughout the year, witnessing Viper pull a 2021 Washington Decay, doing his best to carry his shit team. Viper on Tracer was the only reason Shanghai ever looked competitive, unless Hisu decided to show up that day, which wasn't very often. Viper was coined as Sticky Fingers because his pulse bomb stick rate was just unbelievable. He was regularly finishing an entire series with a 50, 60, sometimes even more % stick rate. Some individual maps were closer to 80. His tracer mechanics were quite good as well, and unexpected because he was supposed to be a Genji one-trick. After watching numerous matches from Viper, I did a sin against the Bible and visited Reddit when I still used that cesspool to see how other people thought. There are some in the world who are worried about the third temple being built and the Antichrist coming along, while I'm worried about what I'm going to read on a Reddit thread. And barely ever did I see people singing the praises of Viper, saying stuff like, wow, Viper is an animal, his stick rates are bananas. No, instead I got to read, why have I been stuck in gold for 7 years? My teams are always bad. What can I do? I hate this game. Viper is and was a much more important topic. He was on a terrible team and having insane tracer performances on the daily. If he was on an Atlanta Reign or Florida Mayhem in 2023, sure, it wouldn't have been as wild considering who would be around him, but Shanghai was actually garbage and Viper was making them competitive by himself. I genuinely don't even think these guys were trying to win. Shanghai was that bad. There were maps Viper essentially won on his own from getting crucial kills on repeat. This is obviously not easy to do. The only person that comes to mind is Shockwave, who made a name for himself on Vancouver Titans in 2020, looking to be the best player on that team when it was a piece of junk. To be fair for a second, Hisu did have a few good moments in 2023, but Viper was the highlight. Seeing a player who had no name whatsoever being one of the best tracers individually is wild at this level of play. Obviously, the 2023 season was a bust. No matter how hard Viper tried, the devil consumed his bum and no fun was to be had. Not even a playoff showing. Nothing at all. Losing to Guangzhou Charge 2-3 during play-ins. I really was hoping this wouldn't be the end of Viper. Being on a team of this caliber can really give the wrong impression at face value, and funnily enough, a similar thing happened to our other friend here, Knife on Vegas Eternal. This kid was absurd, joining Vegas as a mid-season pickup, one of the most atrocious franchises Overwatch League ever saw, winning like 1 match in 2 seasons with 3 different rosters. Roster number 3 is where Knife came in. Having a performance so good, Vegas actually had a competitive match against Boston Uprising, who was a top 4 team. His tracer play was otherworldly, but the team was so goddamn bad no wins could be had, and I do believe all the Korean players were on ping at like 4 AM, but still, this also makes Knife's performances throughout all the matches even more enticing. Yet again, the onlookers were hoping this wouldn't be the end of his career, but I'm guessing these two must have had a pact. Viper comes in saying, "We were both on shit teams, let's form together and make a team that's not shit." Knife said, "Okay." So the team Yeti was created. Skepticism was immediately put towards this team though, mainly in the support line and Donghak's solo tanking. I do feel Dong is a good tank for Winston, Doom, and Ball, but he's a player who needs another person alongside him to fill his holes. The backline of Bliss and Irony isn't terrible, but their showings in 2023 weren't too inspiring. Bliss on Dallas, who was garbage for half the season, and Irony was on Vegas with Knife, not winning a single match. Going into Champion Series Korea, people had Yeti more towards the bottom in the Pokerface, Sinprissa, and Vesta crew area, which makes sense. These teams were stacked to the brim until we learned later how things would really turn out. If you watched the video I made about Genesis, yeah, it's very sad to say the least. Initially, Yeti was not doing too well. Donghak was looking like 2021 Gesture where the feed engine never shut off, ramming straight through family cars and orphanages. Nothing would stop it. Interesting how he was a lot more tempered on Atlanta Rain, but Yeti, he was giving his enemies a lot of ultimate charge, to put it nicely. The backline wasn't doing too good, lots of awful nanos by Irony. Bliss was very scrappy with his play, getting caught out quite often. Our only consistency was this DPS line previously of Team Shitter, Knife, and Viper. Coming from horrible homes to their new family, keeping the team in fights, making massive plays, Viper is still looking to have the similar performances from Shanghai Dragons, and in my opinion, Viper is the best tracer in the world when it comes to pulse bombs specifically. The sticky fingers don't miss, dude. He's just wild at landing pulse bombs. Initially, I was confused about Knife being the hitscan player. He's known for flex DPS like Tracer, Echo, or Genji. Not just anyone can whip out the hitscan and be insane at it, but apparently Knife is not a regular guy. His Cassidy and Sojourn play was actually really good. Whenever Viper was getting shut down a lot, Knife always came in to pick up the slack, and honestly, he's one of the best DPS players in Korea, period. The shock truly comes when they're both having a heater. Knife and Viper become a very terrifying DPS line to go against. The only issue was the rest of Yeti just not being explosive and very limp. With all these other top tier DPS lines, they have a better core around them. Heesung and Lip, Proper and Stalker being the most normie examples. Even Flora and Alpha Yi have a better core. What was the proof? Well, Yeti lost to all these teams. At least Yeti was beating the teams they were supposed to beat, like Sinprissa, Pokerface, Vesta Crew, and Genesis. Shocking most people, honestly. I still can't believe how bad that team is. And losing to ones they were supposed to, like WAC, Falcons, and FTG, essentially being mid right next to Runaway. Well, lower mid, because Runaway 3-0'd Yeti, but still. Knife and Viper never really had a bad match. These two 100% can use the ranked mindset of it's everyone else's fault and not theirs. As a viewer, we can all see Yeti's DPS is not the problem. Until something happened behind the scenes. Obviously, we know Yeti has Shanghai Dragon's best tank player of all time in Flutta. Fate is there. They must have taken Donghak out back, pummeled him with a club or something, because the Dong has really leveled up on his Doom and Winston play recently. Flutta was forcing him to rewatch the Car Q tips and tricks videos with All Heroes 2024 edition Winston and Doom segment. Irony was sitting in lobbies practicing Ana nade lineups for 15 hours a day. Bliss was grinding Lucio Surf, because when Yeti rolled out the gates during their first seeding match and beat WAC 3-1, delivering them their first loss in Champion Series Korea, literally everyone was shocked. Me sitting there at 7 AM with my eyes burning out of my head, appalled at what I just watched. When we see the rest of Yeti level up and start putting out good performances against top teams, we are able to see what Knife and Viper are truly capable of. Viper had the match of his life, running Heesung shit throughout the entire thing. Knife on Sojourn and Cassidy was having a better game than Lip. Even these two leveled the hell up, which is wild because Knife and Viper were already the best players on this team. showing these two have even more punch-up potential. Out of nowhere, Yeti became a group of players that was actually really good instead of Knife and Viper being the only two making them relevant or allowing Yeti to take maps. Everyone as of late has really seemed to have started firing on all cylinders and show they can hold their own against the top teams. Going to map 5 against FTG and Team Falcons allowed us to accept we have another good team to watch, and at the end of the day, that's the most important thing. No one wants to watch 90% of matches be a 3-0 stomp because it's boring. The more quality teams we have, the better the viewing experience will be. Champion Series Korea is really looking like a coin flip at the moment in the top 4. Anyone could end up winning the stage finals coming up. Weeks before this, FTG, Falcons, and WAC pummeled Yeti into the ground. Those matches were not close. So Yeti's improvements are quite impressive, especially in such a short time frame. All the top 4 teams have DPS who are more than capable of taking over the server, and most people never thought Yeti would be in that conversation, but here we are. I see people singing the praises of Viper now, but I'm sitting here thinking, where was all this last year? Where was everyone jumping on the Viper train? The Overwatch Classic bandwagoning is very strong, I see. Going into Champion Series, I can understand why people overlooked Knife and Viper because they're competing with people who were former OWL MVPs, candidates, champions, or just storied players who showed good performances throughout their tenures. But both Viper and Knife are no slouches, and viewers are finally starting to realize how much firepower these two can put out. Especially if the rest of Yeti keeps up this good performance, this team's gonna be really scary in the future. I'm not going to say Viper is the be-all, end-all, greatest player in the world. We haven't seen much aside from Tracer and Genji from him, but Tracer has been hard meta throughout Champion Series, and he looks to be the best when it comes to pure pulse bomb usage, so you can't really argue with it. If he's this good at Tracer, surely he'd be fine at playing Echo or whatever other flex DPS heroes are asked of him. Knife is by far the best player on Yeti, being able to flex over to Tracer, Echo, or even Hitscan, and that Hitscan was completely unexpected to be as good as it is, by the way, which makes him an even more interesting prospect. Going forward, I'm excited to watch these two pound more cheeks since clearly they're capable of it. I'm glad to see these two were starting to really make a name for themselves, especially when their previous teams were so bad. I'm curious to hear all of your thoughts on Knife and Viper. Were you a competitive Overwatch normie and bandwagon these two after Yeti's victory against WAC, or were you always high on them? Make sure to leave your thoughts in the comments below. Thank you so much for watching to the end. Be sure to subscribe for more Overwatch content if you haven't already. Also, check out the playlist on screen if you're interested in more competitive Overwatch content.